Imagine being locked in a hospital bed for 40 years. You can't move, you can't speak, and the only way to escape that physical prison is to permanently upload your consciousness to this pristine, corporate-owned digital server.
Right, a complete virtual paradise.
Exactly. But there's a catch. The government, or even your estranged family, has the legal authority to just say no.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction.
Right.
But the mechanisms that would allow or deny that kind of sanctuary, they're already operating in our legal system right now.
Right.
Because we tend to think of privacy as this physical space, like a heavy wooden door you can lock to shut out the world.
Yeah.
But that door isn't made of wood.
No.
It's made of legal interpretation.
Okay, let's unpack this because today we are on a mission to explore that really profound intersection of human privacy, legal rights, and how our culture dreams of a safe sanctuary.
Yeah, it's a massive topic.
It is, and we are pulling from an incredible stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got the legal history of the landmark Lawrence versus Texas Supreme Court case, some brilliant critical analysis and script excerpts from Black Mirror's iconic San Junipero episode, and we're also looking at the real-world application of these ideas through the Harvey Milk High School in New York.
Which is such a fascinating connection to make.
Yeah, so to understand why we dream of digital utopian sanctuaries in the first place, we first have to understand the very physical invasions of privacy that shattered our illusion of that locked door.
And the most illustrative starting point for that is, well, it's the inciting incident of Lawrence versus Texas, because it perfectly demonstrates how the most mundane, almost petty human conflicts can trigger an absolute constitutional earthquake.
Let's go to September 17th, 1998, in Harris County, Texas, just east of the Houston city limits.
Good.
John Geddes Lawrence is hosting two acquaintances at his apartment, Tyron Garner and Robert Eubanks.
And the dynamic here is really important context for what happens next.
Right.
Lawrence and Eubanks have been friends for over 20 years.
Right.
And Garner and Eubanks have had this intermittent, somewhat volatile romantic relationship since about 1990. And on this particular night, Garner and Eubanks don't have a ride home, so they're getting ready to crash at Lawrence's place.
But Eubanks has been drinking heavily.
Oh, right.
And he starts getting jealous, convinced that Lawrence is flirting with Garner. So he leaves the apartment to get a soda from a vending machine, and in this fit of drunken spite, he decides to call the police.
Yeah.
But he doesn't call in a noise complaint.
No, he doesn't.
He files a completely fabricated report telling dispatch there is a black male going crazy with a gun in Lawrence's apartment.
And that specific lie, that is the legal skeleton key here.
Because it changes the police response entirely.
Exactly. A noise complaint wouldn't necessarily allow police to just walk right in. But a report of an active gunman that provides the exigent circumstances and probable cause that the police need to enter the premises immediately.
Wow.
So 4 Harris County Sheriff's deputies arrive in minutes with weapons drawn. They enter Lawrence's apartment, which just happens to be unlocked, and obviously they don't find a gunman.
Right, because there wasn't one.
There wasn't one. What the lead deputy, Joseph Quinn, later reports finding is Lawrence and Garner engaging in sexual intercourse in the bedroom.
And this is where a minor domestic dispute accidentally changes American legal history forever. Because Deputy Quinn doesn't just, put his gun away, say false alarm, and leave. He decides to arrest them.
Right, but he actually has to pause first. He gets an assistant district attorney on the radio to check the state statutes to see if sexual activity between 2 consenting adults inside a private residence was even a crime.
Because even he wasn't totally sure.
Yeah, he had to check. And it was. Under 1973 Texas homosexual conduct law, engaging in deviant sexual intercourse with another individual of the same sex was a Class C misdemeanor.
So they're arrested, they're held in jail overnight, and released the next day on a $200 bail. And just to close the loop on Eubanks, he eventually gets 30 days in jail for the false police report, though he only serves 15.
Right.
But for Lawrence and Garner, the legal gears really start turning. They team up with Lambda Legal, a civil rights organization, and they go before a justice of the peace who finds them $100 each.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer tactical brilliance of the defense in that moment. A $100 fine was actually below the legal threshold required to appeal the case to a higher criminal court.
Oh, wait.
So the defense attorneys explicitly asked the judge to raise the fine.
Wait, they asked for a harsher punishment? I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this because it sounds like intentionally tripping a circuit breaker just so you can force the landlord to come out and inspect the entire house's faulty wiring.
That is the perfect way to look at it, yes. They wanted the state to inspect the wiring. They intentionally asked the judge to raise the fine to $125.
Wow.
And the judge, fully aware they were setting up a constitutional challenge, agreed. So Lawrence and Garner pleaded no contest specifically to maneuver this case up the appellate ladder. They were forcing the courts to answer a fundamental question about the 14th Amendment.
Which eventually brings us to the Supreme Court showdown in 2003.
Right.
And the 6-3 decision that came down was monumental. The court struck down the Texas sodomy law, they invalidated similar laws on the books in 13 other states, and they explicitly overturned a previous Supreme Court decision from 1986 called Bowers versus Hardwick.
But how they struck it down is where we really get into the architecture of our legal rights. The justices arrived at this conclusion through entirely different legal philosophies.
Okay, let's hear it.
So Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote the majority opinion, and he rooted it deeply in what is known as substantive due process under the 14th Amendment.
Okay, let's break that down because legal jargon can get dense really quickly.
Yeah.
What is substantive due process in plain English?
Think of it this way. Procedural due process means the government has to play by the rules before they take away your freedom. They have to give you a fair trial, a jury, a lawyer, all of that.
Right, the process itself.
Exactly. But substantive due process asks a bigger question. Are there certain fundamental aspects of human liberty that the government simply isn't allowed to regulate at all, no matter how fair the trial is?
Okay.
And Kennedy argued yes. He focused on personal autonomy and stated that America has a long tradition of non-interference in the private, consensual sexual lives of adults. The government has no business in that bedroom.
That makes total sense. But Justice Sandra Day O'Connor concurred with the judgment using a completely different tool, right? The Equal Protection Clause.
Exactly. To use your earlier idea, if Kennedy's argument was a zoning law saying the government can't build a watchtower in this private neighborhood at all, O'Connor's argument was you can't build a watchtower that only spies on certain houses.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she pointed out that the Texas law was unconstitutional because it criminalized intimacy for same-sex couples, but not the exact same behavior for different sex couples. It was an unequal application of the law.
We have to look at the dissents, too, because understanding the opposing judicial philosophy is really critical to seeing the whole board here.
Oh, absolutely.
Justices Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas looked at this same case and saw a massive overreach by the court.
They absolutely did. Justice Scalia wrote a passionate dissent, and he was joined by Chief Justice Rehnquist and Justice Thomas. Scalia's judicial philosophy was rooted in the idea that if a right isn't explicitly written in the Constitution or deeply rooted in historical tradition, the court shouldn't invent it.
Right.
He argued the court was stepping outside its role as a neutral interpreter of the law and instead taking sides in a culture war, effectively signing on to a homosexual agenda.
And he also laid out a legal slippery slope, didn't he? He argued that by removing moral disapproval as a valid, rational basis for state laws, the court was knocking down the foundational logic that supports a whole host of other laws.
Yes, exactly. His logic was structural. He was saying if the state can no longer use its moral code to regulate private adult behavior in this instance, what legal barrier remains to stop the invalidation of laws against bigamy, adult incest, or same-sex marriage?
And Justice Thomas also wrote a separate, very brief dissent that really illuminates this strict textualist view of the Constitution.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read.
Because he explicitly stated that he thought the Texas law was, quoting him here, uncommonly silly. And he said that if he were a state legislator, he would actually vote to repeal it.
But he drew a really hard line between the role of a legislator and a judge.
Right.
Thomas argued that as a judge, he is bound by the text of the Constitution, and he could find no general right of privacy written in that document. Therefore, even if the law is silly, the state of Texas had the constitutional authority to pass it.
So what does this all mean for the actual men in that apartment? Because we have these towering constitutional debates, but what happened to Lawrence and Garner?
That is the deeply tragic reality of this case. They sparked a legal revolution, but they didn't get to live in the world they helped build.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Robert Eubanks, the man who made the fake call, was beaten to death in an unsolved murder in 2001, before the Supreme Court even heard the case.
Oh, my goodness.
Tyrone Garner died of meningitis in 2006. He was only 39 years old. And John Lawrence died of heart complications in 2011 at age 68.
It's just devastating. They won this historic victory for bodily autonomy, but their lives were cut so short.
Yeah.
And that generational trauma of being marginalized by the law, of losing an entire generation prematurely to violence in the AIDS crisis, that is exactly what inspired a massive shift in how our pop culture began dreaming of safe spaces.
It really is.
It takes us directly out of the Texas courtroom and into the neon glow of Black Mirror.
Specifically, Season 3, Episode 4, San Junipero. It is a masterclass in how art processes historical trauma by engineering a fictional digital sanctuary.
For anyone who hasn't watched it, Black Mirror is usually known for bleak dystopian warnings about technology, but the creator, Charlie Brooker, intentionally broke his own formula here.
He did.
He realized doing nothing but downer endings would get completely predictable, so he challenged himself to write an optimistic story. And just to clear the air on a popular internet rumor, Netflix didn't force him to lighten up. Brooker did it as a creative experiment.
And it works so well. He drops us into this sun-drenched, incredibly vibrant 1980s California beach town called San Junipero.
Yeah, the aesthetic is amazing.
It is, but we quickly learn the 80s aesthetic is an illusion. The technology driving this world is immersive nostalgia therapy. San Junipero is a massive, cloud-based virtual reality simulation run by a corporation called TCKR Systems.
And the rules of this sanctuary are fascinating. If you are living, you get a trial pass. You can only plug in for 5 hours a week, specifically so your brain doesn't lose its grip on physical reality.
Right.
But if you are dying or elderly, you can choose to be permanently uploaded to the cloud when your physical body shuts down.
And this brings us to the two main characters, Yorkie, played by Mackenzie Davis, and Kelly, played by Gugu Mbatha Raw. Yorkie's backstory is incredibly poignant, especially when viewed alongside the legal history we were just discussing. In the physical world, Yorkie is an elderly woman who has been locked in a hospital bed for 40 years. Back in 1980, when she was 21, she came out to her deeply conservative parents. They rejected her entirely, she drove away distraught, and got into a terrible car crash that left her completely paralyzed.
She literally lost her entire life to that family rejection. And San Junipero is the technology that finally gives her back her agency, her youth, and her body.
Exactly. And what Brooker is doing thematically is replacing theological judgment with secular grace. Historically, religious sanctuaries or concepts of heaven are framed as something you have to earn through moral purity or institutional obedience.
Right, like a test.
Yeah. But San Junipero is democratized divinity. It's engineered by humans and is governed strictly by consent.
Yes, and they even have an explicit opt-out clause. You aren't trapped in eternity. The inhabitants have the absolute right to delete their consciousness at any time, because immortality only works if you retain the autonomy to end it.
Such a powerful concept.
But wait, I have to push back on the pure fantasy element here. Because for all the glowing neon and 80s arcade nostalgia, the actual climax of the episode isn't a digital battle in the cloud. It is a grim, bureaucratic legal fight taking place in physical hospital rooms in Carson City and Santa Rosa.
It is.
Why must Kelly marry Yorkie in the real world for this fantasy to work?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brilliant piece of historical commentary. In the physical world, Yorkie wants to be euthanized so her consciousness can jump permanently into San Junipero. But because she is paralyzed, she is physically incapable of signing the legal paperwork.
Right.
And her conservative biological family, the same people who rejected her 40 years ago, they refuse to sign it for her. They are legally keeping her trapped in her paralyzed physical body against her will.
Oh, wow. Which is a direct reflection of what happened during the 80s and 90s.
Precisely. This explicitly mirrors the horrors of the AIDS crisis. During that era, it was tragically routine for biological families to bar lifelong queer partners from ICU rooms. Because those same-sex relationships weren't legally recognized by the state, biological families retained total control of medical decisions.
Oh, that's awful.
They often completely disregarded the patient's true wishes or shut out the partner they had built their entire life with.
So Kelly marrying Yorkie in that hospital room isn't just this sweeping romantic TV trope. It's a tactical legal weapon.
Exactly. By marrying Yorkie in the physical world, Kelly becomes her legal spouse and her medical proxy. That legal status, which is granted by the state, allows Kelly to completely override Yorkie's biological family.
Wow.
It grants Yorkie the bodily autonomy she has been denied for 40 years. It is the exact kind of legal autonomy, the right to make private choices about your own body and your own relationships, that Justice Kennedy was defending in the Lawrence versus Texas decision.
That is incredible. The law is literally the bridge to paradise in this story. The episode ends with this deeply emotional sequence. Belinda Carlisle's Heaven is a Place on Earth starts playing.
Such a great song choice.
It's perfect. Kelly, who we learn had a full 49-year marriage in the real world and lost a daughter, Allison, she decides to finally let go of her physical grief. She passes away and joins Yorkie permanently in San Junipero.
But Brooker refuses to let us forget the mechanics of this miracle. As Yorkie and Kelly drive off into the sunset in this beautiful convertible, the camera pulls back out of the simulation and reveals the cold industrial reality of TCKR Systems server racks. We see robotic arms silently sliding glowing data modules into blinking servers in a massive warehouse.
It's a bittersweet reality check. It reminds us that these sanctuaries are entirely engineered. And we don't just engineer them in the cloud, we build them in the real world too, because we have to.
Yeah.
The outline for today's dive included the Harvey Milk High School in New York City, located at 2 Astor Place. And when you look at how it operates, it is the physical equivalent of San Junipero. Their motto is literally education for a better world. They aren't waiting for a digital afterlife. They're actively engineering a physical sanctuary for marginalized youth right now.
And that physical space is vital because it functions as a bubble of protection against the hostilities of the outside world. But the existence of Harvey Milk High School, much like the servers running San Junipero, is heavily dependent on the laws and cultural frameworks that allow it to operate safely in the middle of Manhattan.
Which brings us back to those thin legal walls. Because Lawrence versus Texas felt like a definitive victory that locked the door, but the legal foundations protecting these privacy and autonomy rights are not carved in stone, are they?
This raises an important question about the permanence of legal precedent. To understand the fragility of these rights, we have to look at the 2022 Supreme Court decision, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which overturned Roe versus Wade.
And specifically, we need to look at Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion in that case.
Yes. In his Dobbs concurrence, Justice Thomas stated that the court should reconsider all of its substantive due process precedents.
Okay, and we talked about substantive due process earlier. That's the idea that certain fundamental liberties are off limits to government regulation.
Exactly. And Justice Thomas explicitly named Lawrence versus Texas, dealing with sodomy, and Obergefell versus Hodges, dealing with same-sex marriage. He wrote that these previous decisions were, in his view, demonstrably erroneous, and that the court has a duty to correct the error established in those precedents.
So he is applying that exact same strict textualist philosophy he held in 2003, arguing that if the Constitution doesn't explicitly spell out a right to privacy for these acts, the court shouldn't be protecting them.
Right.
How did the opposing justices in the Dobbs case view the implications of that?
Well, the dissenting justices, Justice Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, they issued a stark warning about the mechanics of this legal shift. They argued that the court was adopting a new standard where a right must be deeply rooted in mid-19th century history to be valid.
Mid-19th century, wow.
Yeah. Their argument was that if you apply a mid-19th century historical test to modern society, then any right that doesn't meet that standard is suddenly insecure. They warned that a whole host of established privacy rights that allow people to govern their own lives and bodies are currently under threat of being unraveled.
If you were wondering why a deep dive into a 1998 arrest, a sci-fi TV show, and constitutional theory matters to you today, this is why. The line between a utopian sanctuary and a dystopian nightmare rests on incredibly delicate legal threads.
It really does.
Whether we are talking about the physical privacy of your own bedroom, your right to make medical decisions for the person you love, or the ability to build a high school where marginalized kids can just be kids without fear, the sanctuary only exists as long as the law allows the door to remain locked.
It's true. The physical walls of our homes and our schools don't protect us if the legal walls fall down.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and a thought I want to leave you with. Let's go back to San Junipero and that final chilling shot of the TCKR server warehouse.
Oh, yeah.
That entire digital afterlife relies on massive corporate servers located in the physical world. And as we just discussed, our real-world legal rights to privacy and autonomy remain under constant threat of being challenged, reinterpreted, or completely overturned. So who truly owns your right to paradise?
It is the ultimate intersection of corporate power and constitutional law.
If a private corporation is hosting your consciousness in a server farm in California, and the government decides to redefine your legal rights regarding who you can be or who you can love, could your digital soul be subjected to the exact same legal and political battles we are fighting on Earth today? Does the Constitution apply to the cloud, or is heaven just another jurisdiction?
If heaven is a place on Earth, it's subject to Earth's laws.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If this sparked some thoughts for you, please discuss it with your friends, leave us a comment, and make sure to subscribe. We appreciate you being here. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you. Take care.